Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I'd like to share Gay Men and Kink, Sensory Enhancements to Sex, an overview of materials, circumstances, and fabrics, Part 2. So, if you've heard Part 1 of this two-part episode, you've already heard my overview of the materials and circumstances in kink play as an enhancement to sex. It's not something you have to do, it's just something fun to do. So, back in that episode, whether you heard it a little while ago or a long while ago, we talked about materials. And by materials, I meant things that are natural to the body or are common in certain niche kink play. And this can be urine, also known as water sports, or feces play, which is somewhat rare in my experience, but it's certainly out there as a fetish, also known as scat play. And for many people, it's also a very common sexual limit, as is maybe blood or permanent marks. Those would be very commonly heard limits to kink play. Semen, of course, the exchange of bodily fluids, including things like semen or cum or spit. Sweat used in kink, smoke used in kink, as well as situations, bondage, electricity. We talked about the violet wand, constraint or confinement or mummification, such as harnesses or restraints or sleep sacks or things that are used for confinement and constraint to enhance dominant and submissive power dynamics. We mentioned a bit about flogs and whips and paddles, which are common sex toys. It would be on stores or websites that sell those. Weight suspension, which is really kinky. Somebody literally suspended by their own flesh with hooks in their flesh, which is pretty extreme. I've seen that only once, but it is something that, has been known to have been done as a kink. Breath play, which can be somewhat dangerous medically, but when done in certain safe ways and playfully, it can be kind of an exciting dominance and submission play. And fisting, using your hand to penetrate the anal canal. So we went into some of those, and if you'd like more depth on those, listen to the previous episode. But today, here in part 2, I'd like to offer again an overview discussion of certain materials that I collectively call fabrics, for lack of a better term, that can be used sensorially to enhance sex through wearing them or using them in play. So there's about 10 of them, and let's talk a little bit about each one, let's say, for your consideration to maybe experiment with, or maybe you're already an aficionado of this particular fetish. But for those of you that are newer and maybe want an overview discussion, this is what I offer here today, and maybe we'll get into more depth some other time if you'd like to hear more about some of these. So number one, in terms of eroticized fabrics or material that you can wear or use, is just leather. Leather is the classic kink material for all sexual orientations and all gender identities. It's just iconic historically in its depiction of the bad boy persona, its ties to motorcycling or airplane piloting, and it just looks and feels and smells and sounds great. It's a very sensory material. Leather can be in the form of jackets, vests, arm cuffs, harnesses, jock straps, shirts, pants, leg harnesses, cuffs, cock rings, masks, blindfolds, gags, gloves, belts, boots, the whole shebang. It's a all-purpose material. And it's a bit controversial. It's an animal product, not safe for vegans. But artificial or vegan leather products are becoming increasingly available just for that reason, because of the increasing popularity of vegan diets and vegan lifestyles that eschew animal products of all kinds. Its association with being a durable, tough fabric imparts a certain strong masculinity, not the toxic kind. Not all masculinity is toxic. That's a problem. I have a previous episode on that. But we're talking about a more positive masculinity. It imparts that to its wearer. So its association with flogs and whips and paddles and play sheets and pillows or wrist and ankle cuffs or slings, that goes beyond the leather that one might wear. But leather-themed social events where gay men would wear various forms of leather gear in different colors and styles proliferate worldwide. The classic one being International Mr. Leather in Chicago every Memorial Day weekend, but also Folsom Street Festival in San Francisco, usually in September, Folsom Europe, also in early fall in Berlin, various local leather title contests and theme nights, leather socials all over the world, and especially in places currently like Berlin and London or Antwerp. All of these have had great events. The kink angle, psychologically, is generally regarded as a way of adopting a persona by way of what one wears. There are some theories in acting that an actor might get into character the minute he puts on the costume. So we have many examples of associations with fabrics and persona. So a military uniform, for example, in all of the different branches, a Boy Scout uniform, a police officer's uniform, a suit of armor from medieval times, motorcycle riding gear, the bodysuit or the jacket and pants, bicycle riding gear that's padded and body conforming. There are many. So in leather, it's implied that the wearer is adopting, by donning, a symbolic expression of a positive masculine energy. Strength, endurance, protection, bravery, virility, confidence, camaraderie or esprit de corps, and validating the raw joy of an expressed sexuality that playfully manipulates a power dynamic between dominance and submission in a way that creates fraternity and even intimacy. So with all these fabrics, their meaning and their purpose go beyond just what they are as a material, but also the qualities that they imply and symbolize in ways that can be celebrated in a social context, either in groups, in public, to create a community affinity, or in private for kink sexual expression. So the second one of these is rubber. Next to leather, rubber is a close second of materials and fabrics to be eroticized, especially when worn. So rubber shirts, t-shirts, muscle shirts, pants, chaps, gloves, can all be used in rubber fetish play. And since it's waterproof, rubber is sometimes, but not always, associated with water sports or urine-related play, especially when the rubber garments are adorned with yellow accessories or yellow trim, like the on stripes or piping down the side of pants, for example, or yellow trim on a harness. So rubber, when used in kink, can imply a community in just that, or a community of water sports play enthusiasts. Rubber can also imply qualities like accentuating and hugging the body, a sense of compression that can be energizing, and when touched by another, it can enhance and intensify touch, such as your nipples or your crotch. Rubber can also be vegan friendly as an alternative to leather, and can also be associated with younger guys. It's also kind of hard to get on and off, so wearing it can imply a quality of tenacity, that you're able to get it on and off, and you're not someone who gives up on anything easily. It's because you've conquered that challenge, and maybe that implies that if you can do that, you can conquer other challenges. Nothing stops you. Number 3 is neoprene. Now, stores and websites that sell leather or rubber gear, kinkwear, or accessories often also sell neoprene, and that's a synthetic rubber-like material that has stretch and conformity when worn. So harnesses, puppy masks, shorts, etc. can be made of this, and it's also easier to color for other variety or to indicate fetish community affiliation. Yellow for water sports, red for fisting. This can also have an overall lower price point, perhaps, for younger guys who might earn less and still want to own or wear fetish gear, like a harness to a dance event or a pride event, that isn't, especially overpriced, like leather or rubber gear, which, since they're specialty or artisan designed items, tend to be expensive. Number 4 is just anything in uniform. So various writers have discussed how the gay men's leather community and concurrently burgeoning gay rights movement at that time, around the 1940s, and certainly in the 50s, was born out of the aftermath of World War II, including returning military men. So the commonality of what motorcycle club men wore, such as black leather jackets, pants, gloves, etc., became a certain uniform that symbolized not only safer protective gear for riding a motorcycle, particularly in urban environments, but it was also a certain code of how these gay men were coming together to form a community that was beyond the previous green carnation worn in the lapel type of code of much earlier days of gay men's very discreet self-identification. And returning military men had also spent a lot of time in military uniform, which was not only practical for military operations, especially in war, but also uniforms create an esprit de corps, a group cohesion and loyalty and cooperation and strength in numbers, and a certain egalitarianism and equality, that the individual interests are subsumed to the group goals, particularly in something like the military, but it can be other things too, like a school spirit. And it's also a validation of the purpose behind the forces of the uniform. It's also recognizable, and it's an impressive aesthetic of the well-designed uniform that accentuates the male body. This is by design. A lot of people who design uniforms for a group do so with the idea that wearing this uniform is very likely to be flattering to any of the many guys who might wear this. Uniforms always go beyond just apparel, and they imply a set of values or group norms, such as the military, but also private schools, sports teams with their insignia or their mascot or their colors, religious orders, certainly, the different kind of habits that nun orders might wear, professions, police officers. Look at what police officers wear in different countries of the world. Firefighters, even plumbers, that might have a company logo with their name tag, or painter scrubs, surgeons in kind of the blue cotton scrubs that are practical for medical purposes. So for gay men, the donning of a uniform, often in leather, implies a group cohesion and the assertion of a certain, instant set of qualities. Equality, virility, fraternity, global commonality, sensuality, and the careful attention to detail that shows emotional and an intellectual investment in group ideals, such as gay men's mental health and well-being. So carefully donning a uniform can imply commitment to the cause and the group's shared values. So the Global BLUF organization, BLUF, Organization of Gay Leathermen, which I'm a part of, takes pride in asserting a certain proper approach to donning the formal Leatherman uniform with limited variations. Uniforms can command respect and authority, and often engender curiosity from the outsider who might ask about them and then learn of the group's norms and values by the person answering. I had this experience often when wearing my own leather gear in mainstream public places, which I do sometimes to a purpose. Most recently at a CVS drugstore in Chicago during IML, International Mr. Leather Weekend, to a straight woman visiting from North Carolina. She said, "I kept seeing all these guys dressed like that, and I wondered where the biker convention was." And I thought that was funny because, she associated seeing guys in leather gear with biker gear, which to this day, gay, straight, everybody in between, might wear because, leather is very good protecting you from things like road rash in the event of an accident. But then I explained to her that it was like a gay men's pageant, that International Mr. Leather has a national and global implication for representing the community, the gay male community, and the LGBT and kink and fetish communities in positive ways. They become a cultural ambassador to these positive values of tolerance and inclusion the world over. A man from Belgium won this year's contest. And a number of winners from Los Angeles have been from LA. So let's look at the next one. Some of the more niche ones, I think, that aren't quite as hugely visible and popular as leather or rubber, but the furry community. So this is another kind of fabric affinity community that can be connected to group conferences or festivals or private erotic play, with the furries. And that can be whatever sexual orientation or gender identity in terms of furry animal costumes. So not unlike those seen in theme parks, there's kind of a playfulness to it, almost a childlike quality, and certainly a fantasy quality. And again, the sensuality of the materials. They're soft, they're warm, they have a movement to the pile, and these can be eroticized and enticing. I recently began work with a gay male client in my therapy and coaching practice who's into this, and I keep learning from him about what this community means to him. There's an element of character and fantasy that can have an association to the Comic-Con community, and an overlap with things like the science fiction or superhero or fantasy genres as well. Number 6 is lycra, or athletic gear. Some gay men are especially attracted to materials that are body-hugging or shiny, such as the synthetic fabric lycra, which is a type of polyester that can be very practical for weightlifting, wrestling, in a singlet, Pilates, CrossFit, even Olympic sports like bobsled racing, have lycra or very similar types of fabrics. Bicycling, swimming, all of these can involve lycra, which or it's kind of also-rans, which that's a proprietary fabric, I believe, of DuPont Chemicals, and there would be variations on that synthetic material. But athletic gear of all kinds, pants, jerseys, jock straps, muscle shirts, weightlifting gloves, ball gloves, bats, hockey sticks, helmets, can imply masculinity, strength, bravery, competitiveness, exhilarating exertion, sweat, team camaraderie, health, fitness, enjoyment of the outdoors, and other qualities that get implied instantly just by its wearing. It's a short trip from these other positive qualities that we might appreciate to eroticism and kink play. Number 7 would be silk or lace. So in kink play, deliberately exaggerating or manipulating gender role stereotypes can be fun. That can be a fun play dynamic. Women wearing a tough material like leather or chains, or men wearing delicate fabrics like lace or silk, can turn gender roles on their collective ear and provide kind of a naughty gender-bending experience that defies convention or expectation or societal pressures and the tyranny of conformity about gender roles. So by embracing materials that signify the opposite of one's gender, I realize that's a problematic statement for me to make because it implies a binary expression of gender, to say the opposite. But what I mean is in contrast, the tough material versus the soft material and the qualities we might associate with that, possibly masculinity and femininity in any gender identity. So it's a short trip to an eroticized atmosphere that can fuel the playfulness of dominance and submission dynamics between or among sexual partners. Putting your partner in bondage using soft, preferably kind of discarded neckties, can be a neat combination of the toughness of bondage or the dominance with the softness of the silk material. Number 8 is chainmail. And this is somewhat unusual, and not the least of which because it's expensive to produce this material. It's very tediously handmade oftentimes. Chainmail is the ancient medieval material that you might see in museums, particularly like the Tower of London or something, that knights used as protective gear. that's a network of little interlocking small metal rings that protected against sword injuries in areas that needed a material that's more pliable and flexible than just immovable metal armor plates. So I've seen tank tops and shirts that are shaped from chainmail that, while they're heavy to wear, they accentuate a physique nicely and have a very sensual drape to them. And the heaviness can impart some of the same qualities that the popular weighted blanket craze does, that kind of hugs the body in ways that can make you relax and feel hugged by the very material that you're wearing. So when combined with leather or rubber or neoprene, this can create a look that can imply eroticism and kink just from the combination of materials used, especially in original designs. Number 9, similarly, it just other kinds of metal. Metal implies toughness, strength, even impenetrability. Bank safes are made of thick steel, or missile silos for nuclear weapons are of hardened metal. Tanks in war, or swords and guns are metal. Jail bars, the fundamental skeletons of a skyscraper, would be steel or metal. You use metal when strength against human force or the elements is needed. When used as an erotic material, which is somewhat rare, metal can be used as confinement or bondage in chains or a bondage cage, or sometimes a metal kink bed that has D-rings or attachments for other bondage gear. Metal snaps on leather cuffs or jackets or collars. I personally am allergic to nickel, so I tend to avoid those if I can. But leather jackets would have maybe metal zippers or metal snaps. Or a bondage bed might have strong metal D-rings to attach to leather straps or ropes. Number 10, our last one, is kind of a fabric. It's the hanky code. The classic material in kink is simply the cotton handkerchief, but in such a variety of colors that they imply what a person, usually a gay man, is into, erotically, somewhat specifically without having to say it. So traditionally worn in the back pocket of denim jeans or leather pants or chaps, the colors are associated with different sexual interests. Worn on the left side implies the active partner or top or dominant aspect of that particular play, and worn on the right implies the passive or the done to or the submissive aspect of play. So classic colors and their implications include red for fisting or fistee, yellow for water sports play, gray for bondage, Kelly green for a hustler or a client, olive drab for a military man or those who seek them, white with multicolored dots, which is hosting or looking for an orgy. The list is long and varied. It's available online, and it's perhaps limited by the difficulty of gay men having to recite it all accurately. It's like, what does magenta mean again? I forget that. Is that Kelly green or is that forest green? When you could just ask somebody, hey, what are you into? It's a lot simpler. So if all of this, just kind of sounds like a lot of work, which is a common criticism of kink play with materials and scenes, for something that's supposed to be simple, like simply hooking up sexually, I really see your point. And there would be other things, too, that I didn't really go into with this series, such as hot wax play, ice cube play, food play, whipped cream and chocolate sauce and this kind of thing. The idea is that the possibilities are really endless when you combine different objects and materials and situations. But the idea is that you and a partner or even a series of partners are engaging in fairly commonly found materials in order to enhance sex by way of getting into kink play that arouses and manipulates the senses. Kind of like a theme park does that. You get on a roller coaster and you're getting pleasure from the ride inducing centrifugal force in some way, going upside down or going at high speeds. It's kind of the same thing with that, where you don't have to ingest anything, like a drug or recreational drug, in order to manipulate brain chemicals in a way that can be thrilling. Kink play can be seen as a tool for people in recovery from substance abuse because it's a way to manipulate the brain chemicals such as adrenaline and endogenous opiates without actually having to ingest something. You induce it in the body by way of the circumstances. And that can be fun, and that can be a harm reduction approach to, for example, for guys in recovery from crystal meth. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes kink play can be an alternative to the stimulation from an exogenous stimulant substance. So, all of this discussion, which is merely an overview, you can tell me in the email or a comment or something like that, add the things that I'm leaving out of the materials and circumstances and fabrics used to enhance sex by way of embracing more elaborate, more specific kink play. And this might help you to feel empowered that many different enhancements to sexual enjoyment are available to you, for the choosing. Or to choose not to. You might have this overview and say, yeah, I'll stick with vanilla. And that's a perfectly empowered choice. But discussing all of this as an overview hopefully helps you to feel less alone if you have a kink that you're interested in but perhaps never had it validated or discussed, or a reassurance that you're not the only one who has this erotic interest, and of course that you're not sick or bad or wrong or immoral for having it. These are all options that imply consenting sexual acts among adults, because non-sexual sexual acts that involve weapons or materials and that kind of thing, that's not erotic. Those are interpersonal crimes worldwide that cause frequent physical and certainly psychological damage. But that's not the discussion here. Here, it's an opportunity to increase your awareness of your own and others' sexuality and your sexual options that can lead to what I always call the improvement of your quality of life by way of improving the quality of your sex life. So, for sexual and gender minorities who are hit daily with some form of criticism, diminishment, invalidation, mocking, oppression, stigma, harassment, or even interpersonal crimes of assault and murder worldwide, there are times like this to discuss sexual self-empowerment for its contributions to enhancing, that word again, enhancement of the human experience. And that can contribute to the mental health and well-being of gay men, and that's my thing. That's my thing, mental health and well-being of gay men. So if you would like more specific help with your quality of life in any way, including but not limited to your sex life, please consider therapy if you're a legal resident of the state of California, where I am licensed as a licensed clinical social worker, or coaching services, which is for other states or worldwide. It's a different kind of professional service that doesn't involve treating a mental health disorder as psychotherapy does. So I'm here to help support you in facing all kinds of life challenges as a gay men's specialist for a long time, 30 years, and that's for individuals or couples or polycules. So for more information about all those services or to schedule an appointment, call or text me in the United States. That's area code 310-339-5778. So 310-339-5778. Or email me, ken@gaytherapyla.com. And gaytherapyla.com is the website for other information. If you're interested in my materials, I rarely plug my book, but in 2013, I published a book called Self-Empowerment, Have the Life You Want. So if you go on Amazon or whatever your favorite book online resource is, it's probably not in your local bookstore, search on Self-Empowerment, Have the Life You Want by Ken Howard, LCSW, and that's a more mainstream self-help book, but you might be interested in that. And I'd be doing myself a disservice if I didn't plug the book, right? So with all of these, I hope you enjoy these materials. Your comments and suggestions are always welcome for topics for future episodes. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.